and I have them up here. So if you've heard of anybody that has lost their glasses, they're right here. Secondly, I'd just like to thank our session sponsor, Dudek, for sponsoring this session. And this session, we are going to be going over cutting-edge sustainability, a roundtable discussion of sustainability innovation. I'd like to take a minute to introduce our panelists. Today with us we have Mr. Ted Anasis. We have Gil Friend, Ted Anasis from San Diego International Airport, Gil Friend from Palo Alto, Carly Shannon from CNS Companies, Richard Smith from Los Angeles County, and Hushang Esmaili from San Francisco International Airport. And let me give you just a minute, and I will read their bios very briefly, and we'll get right into this session. And just to be sure, I'm going to get down and walk around. We're going to have some questions for our panelists, and we'd really like this to be an interactive, engaged conversation. If you hear something that you want to chime in on, please just raise your hand and we'll get around to you. And hopefully we can make this a very interactive session where everyone here gets something out of it that they can take back, plant some seeds, and try and get you guys thinking about sustainability a little more. So thank you. So Mr. Ted Anasis is the manager of airport planning with the San Diego County Regional Airport Authority. He manages multiple airport projects in the airport planning department at the San Diego County Regional Airport Authority. Mr. Anasis managed the first ever adopted airport master plan for San Diego International Airport that included the Greenfield 10-gate terminal expansion, which completed construction in 2013. He also led the preparation of the first 20-year capital program for the airport. He is a San Diego native and volunteers at Torrey Pines Reserve with Rebuilding Together. Gil Friend is Chief Sustainability Officer at the City of Palo Alto. For more than 40 years, Gil has helped companies and communities design, implement, and measure profitable sustainability strategies. Founder and chairman of Natural Logic, Inc., and author of The Truth About Green Business and hundreds of articles on sustainability strategy, Gil is widely considered one of the founders of the sustainable business movement. He is now leading Palo Alto's Climate Moonshot. Carly Shannon of CNS Companies is passionate about sustainability and integrating its principles into airport planning, development, operations, and management. Her experience consists of sustainable master and management plans for airports of varying sizes and types, implementation assistance, including pursuit of funding, lead administration and staff training, and development of waste management and recycling plans. In addition to her involvement with ACINA's Sustainability Working Group, Carly leads CNS's Aviation Sustainability Committee. She received her bachelor's degree in environmental geoscience from Boston College and is currently pursuing a master's in urban and regional planning from the University of Florida. Mr. Richard Smith needs no introduction, so we'll just pass him. No, we'll tell you. Richard has been an airport manager for 15 years, started out in the Midwest before relocating to Southern California in 2002. He joined the County of Los Angeles in 2005 and currently oversees the Los Angeles County Aviation Division, where he is responsible for the county's system of 5 GA reliever airports. Hushang Esmaili is the Environmental Policy and Sustainability Director at San Francisco International Airport, with responsibility for ensuring compliance with environmental laws and regulations and development and implementation of sustainability programs. He's a registered civil engineer in California and holds master's and doctor of engineering degrees in civil and environmental engineering from the University of California. He is the author of SFO's Comprehensive Climate Action Plan and SFO's Environmental Sustainability Reports. Since 1994, he has managed the varied environmental projects at SFO dealing with environmental contaminant remediation, water quality control, green building policy information, and sustainability planning. Currently, he is developing a comprehensive sustainability plan for San Francisco International Airport. With that, I'm going to give this microphone over to you, and I'm going to use this microphone. Is it working? Yep, okay, thank you. And there you go. So I just want to give you a brief understanding of our word cloud that we developed as we got this panel together. One of the things that we wanted to do was start generating ideas about what they wanted to speak about and bring different ideas to everybody. So Anyway, are we there? Yeah, we'll go back to this one. Good idea. Okay, so we each individually came up with words that were related to sustainability, trying to generate ideas, and the word cloud that you see here is a result of that effort. And so these words that everyone is looking up here are the words that your panelists, who are experts in this field, this is what they think about when they think about sustainability. So we just wanted to share that with everybody and kind of leave that up so it starts generating ideas and everyone can start thinking about things that they may want to bring to this conversation. So with that, I will start. I have some questions here that I'm going to ask the panelists, and how this is going to work is I will ask some questions directed at an individual panelist. Hopefully they will have some brief remarks on that, followed up by some follow-ups with their other panelists and engagement from everyone here as well. And we'll just keep this thing rolling, try and keep the questions coming, and like I said, generate those ideas that we can then go investigate further as we move out of this session. So with that, I'm going to speak to Ted. Ted, can you tell us, since so many environmental issues are regional or even local in nature, how is your airport making sure that its sustainability issues are aligned with other public agencies and organizations in your area?
Certainly. At San Diego Airport, there's essentially two steps to that. One is getting our house in order and developing a sustainability policy in 2011 and beginning to implement some of the measures that were contained in that. One of the key measures that we completed was in 2013, when our terminal expansion opened, we achieved a LEED Platinum certification, and we were the first terminal in the world to achieve LEED Platinum. So there's a whole suite of measures that go along from our sustainability policy. The second step is then no airport is an island, and our 661 acres of San Diego International Airport are surrounded by not only the community of San Diego, but also San Diego Bay. And so we joined a San Diego regional climate collaboration that included the cities, the U.S. Navy, the Port of San Diego, and the airport to look at both the technical modeling for addressing climate change and sea level rise, as well as looking at the regional policies that we might take.
Great, thank you. Would anybody else on the panel have anything to add on how they coordinate with their local agencies? Ted, good job. Oh, Husheng, would you like?
Yeah, in general, we coordinate with state, federal, and local agencies, communities around the airport. We have a noise mitigation panel. They represent representatives on that panel. So that's a routine matter in our operations.
And likewise, my shop is organized within LA County's Department of Public Works, and we have an environmental programs division that we work closely with on a number of sustainability issues, the full gamut of what we usually talk about here, from going solar to electric vehicles and replacing our fleet with those kinds of things, utilizing different pavement techniques. So yeah, we do quite a lot of collaboration, not just in-house, but also outside in the community, and making sure that we let everybody know what we're doing.
Thank you. Richard, you mentioned solar, and you've been trying to get a solar project off the ground for a while. Can you tell us about the challenges and what innovative things you might think about doing moving forward with that project?
Yeah, certainly. So solar is kind of a big animal to tackle in just a short session like this, but I'll maybe just share my challenge with you. And I also want to mention that Carly worked closely with us on a whole solar white paper, and we're trying to implement a lot of the things that were in there. But for general aviation airports, solar is kind of a difficult thing because we don't have the ability to consume high quantities of the power that even some of the smaller solar plants are going to generate. So the scenario that we experienced routinely is, a solar provider calls you up and says, hey, let's work a deal, and you go, great, let's do it, and you send them all your electric bills so they can do their analysis, and then you never get a call back, right? So after that happened a couple of times, I started asking many more questions, and here's the deal. Has anybody else out there kind of had that same experience, maybe on the GA side of the house? Well, I can assure you that it happens a lot. And the reason it happens is because once a provider finds out that they can't build a 1.5 megawatt system or bigger on your hundreds of undeveloped land, hundreds of acres rather, they go through this process of, well, what would it take, right? So you want a 1.5 megawatt system that you built at your airport, and you're only going to use a very small portion of that at your facility. Then the question comes, well, we need to go out and find other customers that we can connect to your system. So you may be able to help with that, right? You know, talk to your tower, maybe they'll hook you up. Maybe you have a few master developers that you can add a few more meters to it in this, you know, overall goal of using the power that your system is going to generate. But that comes inherent with a lot of brain damage and a lot of work, because you're talking about all kinds of things, power purchase agreements that you're going to have to negotiate with all of these new users, and all of the environmental issues that you're going to have to deal with in working in right-of-ways, and you know, and we can have a whole seminar on interconnectivity and grid issues, but it's been challenging.
Thank you, Richard. Carly, would you like to follow up on that?
Yeah, one thing I would just like to add that the funding structure for solar is kind of an ever-changing thing, and actually when we were doing that analysis, we were certainly looking at the power purchase agreements because there were so many rebates that were available. As some of us in California know, many of those are ending soon or have already ended, so those private companies might not be as incentivized as they previously were. However, the FAA's, their Section 512 funding that is now available, I think they've got 5 projects they've already done, and that's for energy efficiency projects at airports. So that might be another source to start considering for projects like that. So again, the analysis, you just need to consider the market conditions that are out there, and then also the other funding programs that might be available.
Also, in addition to negotiating agreements with individual customers who might take off that power, there's also the option of selling the power directly to the utility, which has its own challenges, of course. But we've seen feed-in tariff be very successful in many jurisdictions, Germany most particularly. We've made dramatic progress with that. You know, we know that with the renewable portfolio standard that the state is mandating, California again ahead of the nation, we're going to see rising demand for solar generation, whether under the current regime or not. And so every place that has an ability to generate needs to be looking at that, and you know, in a prudent way, given the market conditions. But we're going to see more and more demand, and need to find ways to streamline that process.
And just on the practicality of once you implement solar at San Diego, we have become flush with solar panels in the last 3 years, including not only on our terminal buildings, but also our tenants, our general aviation facility, and other tenants have seen the benefits that they can yield. But we're realizing that you don't want to overbuild the solar because of the storage issue. And this is, if you have a residential solar system, you face this challenge as well, as you can actually produce more solar than you can use during your daylight hours. And so I think that is going to be the next challenge, or the next issue we need to solve, is storing that capacity.
Well, I guess we are, excuse me, starting on that. Excuse me. We have 60,000 square feet of solar panels already, but we have established an objective to become net zero energy airport, which is a pretty big objective. We use 450,000 megawatt hours of electricity per year, which is about 1 gigawatt hours per day. And in order to meet that, we would need about 900 acres of solar panels. Well, we looked at our roofs, and we have net maybe 300 acres of roof space, and that could generate probably half of our consumption. However, we are not going to use the solar power directly. We are going to use as much of it as we can, and then feed the rest of it into the grid. So that's our plan, but it's very ambitious, and hopefully we'll achieve at least partially.
he made one small little statement there that means a lot, and he goes, we're going to feed the rest of that into the grid. So for smaller users, you're going to have that same challenge, right? And this lends itself to interconnectivity and grid capacity issues. When we looked at, we have one facility that enjoys 350 fair weather days a year and hundreds of undeveloped acres of land, and we would love to get a big job going up there. But what happens is there's a concept called net energy metering, where utilities are required to take up to 1 megawatt systems without really any questions asked, and very few impositions on the developer. There's another one that's really good for smaller users. It's called virtual net metering, and if you're a municipality or a county or another large user, you may qualify for this, where the utility will allow you to connect a 5 megawatt system and then spread that around your other business units. So if you're a county, for example, you have not only your airport system with a bunch of meters on those, you may be able to get those paid for through this 5 megawatt system without making those grid capacity upgrades. If you don't qualify for that for any number of reasons, you may initiate what's called a connection study, which is no different than any other capacity study that we all know about, and the results of that will be very expensive upgrades. You can just imagine, right? Right-of-way acquisitions and mechanical upgrades to plants and all that. So just makes it all very expensive very quick.
Great. Thank you. I'd like to take this from this very specific topic about solar energy and implementation into go to the other end of the spectrum. And Gil, do you have any ideas on how aviation can move toward carbon neutral or even a net positive travel experience?
Well, I think you start the conversation with SFO, which is already looking at that. And we got two parts. We got the airport itself, and we got the fleets. In the fleets, there are a number of airlines that are looking at biofuels as a possible option, and more out on the edge, there are some beginnings of electric-powered aircraft, obviously not carrying major loads yet, but some people think there's great promise there. For the facilities on the ground, pardon me, I'm not an aviation professional, and I hope I don't offend anybody by saying this, but an airport is just a collection of buildings and motors and pipes and tubes and vehicles and electronic equipment and so forth, like any other building. And so the Platinum Airport that San Diego has deployed is an example of that, of using a process that has been deployed across many different building types across the United States to drive not just better efficiency, but better performance, better space for the people that are in it, more effective buildings in every way. When we used to do green building work back 10, 15 years ago, we would go through extensive conversations with clients who said, well, that won't work, we can't afford it, that seems exotic. And at the end of the day, once the design was done, they would say, well, gee, that's just a good building. It's not a green building, that's just a good building. And we'd say, yeah, that was actually the point from the beginning. So this is all about designing facilities that are excellent, that meet the needs of the people who use them, which is really the most powerful question to ask, what really needs to happen there? And then designing something that works well. It's a really important part of the solar conversation, because solar economics depend enormously on what the load is. And the first step, whenever you think about solar, is to think about reducing load through efficiency of technology, efficiency of buildings, efficiency of rethinking processes, because every reduction in kilowatt hour of demand is less generating capacity that you need to install. And too many people, I think, do that backwards. Solar is cool, let's start there. No, don't start there. Start with efficiency and good design.
Okay, thank you. Any follow-up from our other panelists? Shane?
That's another one of our objectives, to become carbon neutral, but again, that's a challenging objective. We have an ordinance, by the way, the city passed an ordinance that requires all city departments to reduce their carbon emissions 25% below 1990 levels by 2017, 40% by 2025, and 80% by 2050. I'm glad I won't be around for the 2050 object. But anyway, we have been working on that, and we have a definite advantage over other airports because we have hydroelectricity from Hetch Hetchy Reservoir in the Sierras. And that has been declared zero carbon utility, or SFPUC, by Air Resources Board, has been certified as a zero carbon footprint utility. So all we have to do is reduce our other carbon emissions. Right now we have 34% below 1990 emission levels. And in order to reduce that further, we have 18,000 tons a year from natural gas consumption. And we either convert our boilers to electricity, which we could do when we install solar panels perhaps, or we have to automate and optimize the operation of the HVAC system to minimize that to the maximum extent possible. And that's what we are intending to do as a first step.
Parallel story just down the road from each other. So City of Palo Alto Utilities, full service municipal utility, we buy our electricity from SFPUC. We're about half hydro at this point and about a third fossil and a third renewables. We have, as of 2 years ago, purchased RECs to offset the emissions from our fossil fuel, making our electricity carbon neutral as well, and we're in the middle of a 4-year program to eliminate fossil from our portfolio. So 2017, electricity will be native carbon neutral, similar process. The challenge again is natural gas, about 25% of our carbon footprint, and road travel, about 60% of our carbon footprint. Aviation we haven't factored in yet. The airport is new for us. We just took over operations of the airport recently. But we're dealing with very many of the same questions, as are many cities. The 80% by 2050 goal is a California state goal. Many other communities around the world have signed on to it. We're at about 37% right now, a little ahead. It's good. It's healthy competition for us to have together. And we're bringing an electrification plan to City Council in about 3 weeks to look at how do we move systematically out of natural gas. And then as far as the road travel, we're thinking about a variety of mobility strategies that, while they're about cars in that case, I think have some bearing on the aviation conversation too. Because the question we're asking is, how do we make it more convenient for people to do what they need to do? In that case, how do you do it without a car? But I think the same question applies to aviation. It's focusing on what does the actual customer need? Not the infrastructure, not the technology, not the cool stuff that we like to build, but what do people really need, and what will they be needing in the next 5 years or 10 years or 20 years? Because the game is really changing. You spoke about storage. The price performance curve on electricity storage is looking like the curve for photovoltaics. It's dropping and dropping very fast. So the economics are going to look really different in 5 or 10 years. How does that affect your planning horizons?
Just to add on to that, I think one of the important aspects to consider for airports is the engagement process. So even though those emissions targets might be specific to a certain scope of emissions and potentially not necessarily considering your passengers or your tenants, it's still important to engage them. And I know San Diego's done a great job. Actually, Anasis is starting a good traveler program. I think the website, you can see it, but it's intentionally trying to engage them and say, here are your options, here are your ways you can take part in the emissions reductions, whether it be in your way to get to the airport or offsetting your emissions associated with travel. They also, with regards to their tenants and taxis, you did the Clean Vehicle Rebate Program, which was a partnership with one of the local community agencies. So I think that's really important to consider those options as well.
Great, thank you. I want to remind everybody here that we're here for you. So if you have questions specifically related to what we're talking about here, fine. If you have questions that are just burning sustainability questions you want to talk about, those are fair game as well.
Yeah, hi, Jim Lohman, FAA San Francisco ADO, and I'm a recent transplant from Alaska, and so we have different challenges than what you're dealing with, but I was curious in looking at your chart, I didn't see geothermal, and the Juneau Airport has gone in and put in geothermal and is now heating their terminal with it. They're getting ready to construct a really large snow removal equipment building. They've laid a ground loop to accomplish that. And so I'm just curious, it seems like, on an airport, we have all this property where, there's a potential for ground loops. Has anyone looked at it? I haven't, run into anyone that's had a conversation on that.
Well, certainly can't speak for all airports, but the majority of the passenger-serving airports are along the coastline. San Diego in particular, our 661 acres are on fill material. So we have groundwater issues and tidal influence, not geothermal resources.
With geothermal, you don't need to have what we would think as a hot springs or something like that. You just need a ground loop where you're transferring the heat from the ground, and in this case, in California, you would be pulling the heat from the building and then running it through a ground loop in the ground and dumping the heat into the ground and picking up the coolness of the ground and using a heat pump. And I'm no expert on this, but it just seems like a potential that maybe we're missing here in California.
I was just going to speak to, in not having any California experience or actually experience with that, but I know that Nashville Airport just recently got approval and funding through the FAA for the Section 512 funding to do geothermal there. So I think it's definitely worth a consideration.
I agree that you don't need the geothermal source, but you do have to have the appropriate geology and groundwater at appropriate depth. Unfortunately, at San Francisco, we don't have that. We have artificial fill with the first 20 feet. Then we have 80 feet of clay, and underneath that we may have some water-bearing zones, but that's too deep. So we are limited in that regard, but I agree that geothermal would be a viable option if we did have the proper geology and groundwater condition.
At Juneau, they didn't necessarily have an area specific. What they ended up doing is they drilled wells and multiple wells out on their apron area and used that for their loop system. So it wasn't a horizontal loop, it was actually vertical. And again, maybe that's not possible in the clay environment.
The cost would become fairly significant if you have to go 500 feet deep, 200 feet even deep. Usually you do that within 10, 20 feet from the surface. That's usually a viable option. But I agree that should be looked into.
Great, thank you. I'm going to keep bouncing around topics here, and hopefully we're going to stumble on some that draw even more questions from the audience or more engagement. Hushank, can you tell us about SFO's environmental management system and how there might be innovative ways that you're engaging that system for your sustainability efforts?
Well, I guess environmental management is a broad, title. One aspect of it that we have implemented is to get a software environments, page for environments, and we use that software to track all of our environmental regulatory compliance issues and make sure that we don't miss anything. And if there is an element that's exceeded, we immediately know as soon as we enter into the software. We worked on that last year, and we are now operational using that environment software. But in terms of overall environmental management, we have our sustainability plan, and we also publish every 4 years, almost as well as 4 years, a sustainability report, which basically summarizes what we have been doing in the previous 4 years. The latest one just came out a few months ago, and it is on our website. It follows the EON's principle of economic viability, operational efficiency, natural resource conservation, and social responsibility. We devote a chapter to each one of those and basically tell the story of what we have been doing at the airport.
Thank you.
That's, thank you for reminding me of that. That's an element of our.
I'm sorry, excuse me, what was the question, Carly?
The question was the planning, design, and construction sustainability guideline. We are developing a sustainability plan, which is somewhat different than, I guess, what's proposed on ACRP 110, report 110. Our sustainability plan has 13 elements, One of those is to develop planning, design, and construction guidelines. Another one is operational maintenance, sustainability guidelines, and so on down the line. And we have completed the planning, design, construction, sustainability guidelines, which basically guides our construction activities, either new or renovated construction activities. And that it's a fairly comprehensive guideline. Again, it's on our website, flySFO.com/community environment, and it incorporates state, federal, local, jurisdictional requirements, plus Calgary building codes and SFO's additional requirements on all aspects of the planning, design, and construction. Basically, the structure of the guidelines is based on LEED. We follow those elements of the LEED, but we go far beyond the LEED.
Great, thank you. Ted, is this similar to your experience at San Diego?
In terms of our sustainability plan and the measures that we're beginning to implement, some of the measures that we use are a total cost of ownership approach, looking not only at just the construction costs, but the life cycle of that structure, that facility, and even the facility's condition assessment of aging infrastructure to determine its replaceability or suitability, and the savings that may be achieved or the sustainable measures that may be achieved.
The total cost of ownership is a really powerful tool. We've been working with that also, sometimes challenged to bridge the divide between the capital budget and the operating budget, which live in separate worlds but have to be mashed together to be able to make sense of that economic decision. We're also under directive from our city council to find ways to incorporate in the TCO calculation the cost and value of so-called externalities. Environmental aspects that are typically not included in economic calculations, but for example, we were talking before about permeable paving, which is not just a matter of the cost and maintenance costs and operation costs of the paving, but you have value of water capture, water treatment load that may be reduced, energy impacts of those typically not taken into account in a paving decision, but may give very different overall economics for the organization as a whole. We just issued a policy this last quarter to prefer electric vehicles in the city fleet, even though they cost 50 to 80% more to buy, but on a total cost of ownership basis, they're $5,000 a vehicle less. We had to do the economic machinations to make that work, had to get some agreements about bridging the capital and operating budget, but the net result is less emissions and less cost and lower maintenance and better vehicles and better service for our employees. So that's the kind of benefit you can get from the total cost of operation analysis.
So I've got a question. When you start talking about total cost of ownership, how do you start adding a value to the social responsibility aspect of what you do?
Well, we are required by ordinances of the city to follow social and economic policies in terms of employment, in terms of contracting. We have to set aside a portion of our contract for local business enterprises and disadvantaged enterprises, and also in terms of employment. Most of those are dictated by laws at all levels, federal, state, and local. And of course, we municipal ourselves, the management of the airport is interested in addressing those issues and making sure that they take care of them.
One other aspect to that is not only considering just the policy, but the cost savings. And while even if your organization or your airport has not adopted a sustainability policy, it's very easy to convince your management to get on board with cost-saving measures that can be demonstrated. And so, and that requires or necessitates that not only your development, but your operations staff and your finance staff become engaged in your capital improvement programs. At San Diego Airport, we just completed our first ever 20-year CIP program. And why that relates to sustainability is that, and this may not be new to other airports, but at San Diego we had always focused on our 5-year CIP program and then our long-term master plan. But those 15 years between, we didn't have a clear picture of what was happening every 5 years. So we developed a 20-year CIP, and we engaged not just our development folks, but our operations folks and our maintenance department and our finance. And collectively, we really relied upon the involvement and engagement of all the employees to come up with ideas and the priorities of the projects. And I don't want to diminish the value of looking at the cost savings of your projects and how you implement them, because we saw savings in terms of reduced HVAC costs, replacement of roofs, vertical circulation, the replacement of those with more energy efficient systems.
Great, thank you. Carly, this kind of led me to thinking about how many airports have completed sustainability management plans, but then struggle to implement them. And we've kind of talked about that a little bit. But do you have recommendations for strategies or processes, both in the planning process and then afterwards?
Absolutely. I think a common theme that hopefully some of you have already picked up on today is that the key to implementation for sustainability is really integration. So it's into those decision-making processes, into your stakeholder engagement processes there, as well as into your projects. So as opposed to having sustainability siloed, which will always result in cost increases. If you're always looking at it from that basis of it being its own separate island, you're never going to have that holistic approach to integrating it into your organization. So I think you've heard of a couple of the different strategies for doing that. One of the ones that we've been doing recently on projects is the conducting of a sustainability charrette that we have a cross-section of the sponsor's organization involved in, as well as the entire design team, so it's specifically for a design project. And we use that forum to really get everybody together, identify priorities for the project and for the airport, and then generate ideas together in the room, all in the room again, so you have that kind of holistic approach to it. We conduct a little bit of an evaluation, get the feedback there, so we see what is the feasibility of implementation of these things. We don't want to come out with a laundry list of, very unfathomable or untackleable initiatives there. So by taking that process, we're then able to identify specific recommendations for a project. We did this recently. We identified almost 60 different ideas, and then by evaluating them as a team, we came up with 20 that were recommended, and only 2 had any sort of cost increase in over the life cycle of the project would actually result in savings. So I think the more you can do to prioritize initiatives based on your goals and real high priority impact areas, and then evaluate that holistically, the better you'll be.
Great, thank you. Still looking for questions from anybody about anything about sustainability, so think about it. In the meantime, Husheng, can you tell us about San Francisco's waste reduction?
We are, I guess, doing pretty well in that regard also. We have been reporting 80% recycling of our solid waste. Of that, 55% is confirmed because we do it at the airport. We do source separation and multiple cans, for bottles and cans and paper and so on. And also we send about 35% of our waste directly to a composting facility because we did a characterization and we observed that 80–90% of the material is degradable. So it was a natural decision to send it to the compost. Our solid waste contractor reports another 25%. I'm not going to swear by the Bible that really happened. So 55% we're pretty certain. But we have an ordinance that says we have to reach 0 solid waste generation by 2020. So the issue is, how do you achieve that? Obviously, contractors are not going to do it because they don't have the facility to do that for our 30 tons a day of solid waste when they're getting 1,000 or 10,000 tons a day from other sources. They don't have a certain capability. So our option is to build our own sorting facility. And that's what we're looking at. And I guess if the Board of Supervisors insists that we meet the 0 goal by 2020, they have no choice but to build a sorting facility. Of course, we wouldn't sort the garbage with our own staff. We're still contracted to
Yeah, can you tell me, I hear lead and then I hear envision and certification. Can you give me just what that means and what the advantages are?
Yeah, I can start with that. So essentially, LEED is really for the vertical work. So you hear a lot of that with green build and things like that with the terminals. So you're looking at those facility designs. Envision is really intended for infrastructure and horizontal work. In my opinion, I think that leads to a more holistic guidance system. It really is less prescriptive than LEED. So it provides the airport the opportunity to come up with the best strategy. So the whole intent of it is doing the right project as opposed to just doing the project right. I think airports are really picking up on this. We're working on 2 airport projects right now that are pursuing Envision awards. And it gives you the opportunity also to work with the administrating agency and say, this credit is implying this, but on this project it may not work best for this, or it's not providing the right benefits. And they're definitely working with the organizations to work through those steps. Did that answer your question, Andy?
Great.
Yeah, Jennifer Maples from Phoenix Sky Harbor. Question with regards to the solid waste diversion at San Francisco. What's the role of the airlines in your diversion rate? Because one of the challenges we found is that even if an airline wants to participate, every airport is different in what they're able to accommodate. So how have you addressed that?
Well, in general, we encourage the airlines to source separate on the aircraft, not to mix everything up and put it in a plastic bag and put it in the same can. And some of the airlines do a pretty good job. Virgin Atlantic and Virgin America is one example, and some of the airlines don't. But once they deposit it into the bins, then we become responsible for that, except for United that handles its own solid waste, because they think they can save money. So we, again, we put it in our larger bins, and the contractor takes those away. But unfortunately, as I indicated, if it's mixed, it's doubtful once it leaves the airport it gets sorted. And that's why we need to build our own sorting facility. The airlines have limited ability to sort their waste, so we have to do it underground if they don't do it.
I just want to brag on SFO again, because I think you've also done some very interesting upstream work in the new terminal requiring all vendors to use only compostable utensils, so it just eliminates that sorting problem as part of the contractual requirements that if you want to be on the ground here, this is how you'll have to play.
Yeah, we do require that. Unfortunately, utensils are not biodegradable in municipal composting facility. They're required to be biodegraded in a compost pile for 3 months or 6 months. The composting facilities only do it for 2 months. So they get sorted at the end and go to landfill. But we said it was better to use biodegradable than petroleum-based, because petroleum-based never degrades. At least the biodegradable, maybe in 100 years, will biodegrade. That's our requirement. Unfortunately, I don't think that it immediately is converted to compost.
Wanted to add on to that. With regards to waste minimization or recycling at airports, I know, Jennifer, I believe the city of Phoenix, they actually are responsible for all of the deplaned domestic waste. So you have, if I'm remembering correctly, the opportunity to divert and work with the recycling agencies on that. A lot of your airports might actually be the opposite with their existing contracts, where the airlines are completely responsible for that. In which case, I definitely encourage some sort of outreach with them to see if they like how that process is going, if they're open or looking actually for you to be more involved in that waste management, in which case you would, again, have a greater level of control there.
We actually just discovered, well, not just discovered, American, U.S. Airways, our largest carrier, they use Sky Chef, so we have no control over what happens there, and we're trying to now rein that in.
Great, thank you. Very good question. I'd like to maybe change topics here a little bit, and I hear you guys have a drought, pretty severe drought going on. So Ted, really Ted and Gil, I'd like to get your thoughts on that to start that off.
Certainly. Well, along with electricity consumption and the costs related to power use. Water use is also on the increase. And we at San Diego are developing a water master plan. So again, another suite of measures that we can implement to reduce the costs. In our new projects, we include reclaimed water opportunities or places where we can capture or harvest runoff or stormwater runoff in detention basins, and in several of our surface lots we have underground water vaults or underground vaults that capture the rainwater. We are also looking at innovative ways of capturing condensate, and this is a recent development at our airport, but we have a lot of preconditioned air units that are producing condensate that results in water essentially spilling or falling onto the pavement. And so our operations and maintenance staff saw this and began collecting this condensate, and we can now use that for non-potable uses. So it's utilizing not only preventative measures and consumption measures, but also looking specifically at opportunities on your airfield.
Thank you. Gil, would you like to follow up
Sure.
how to?
I would just echo this last one. Asking different questions of your staff so they ask different questions as they go about their businesses are really powerful. So really kudos to you for that. I think there's a couple of dimensions here. I mean, we all talk about the drought, and we're, like the rest of you, under water restrictions. We've got a 24% target that we're moving on as a city. But as Will Sarney from Deloitte says don't call this a drought. Drought implies a short-term cycle of a few years, and we possibly, no certainty, but we're possibly looking at a long-term shift in the water regime of California. The last 100 years is the wettest 100 years in the last 2,000 years. So if that's true, I don't know that it is for sure, but if that's true, we need to think about water in a very different way, and not just short-term savings, but structural rethinking of how we use water. So as with energy, we need to think about efficiency. We need to think about what is the actual function being served and how do we serve that better. Water capture for sure, reclaimed water for another. One of our levers as a city is the building codes, and so in our building codes we're requiring, in stages with each code cycle, we're requiring new and renovated buildings to step up by being photovoltaic ready, by being electrical vehicle ready, and now about being reclaimed water ready. We're not going to require people to do things, but we want to make sure the infrastructure is put into place now in the built environment so that if and when it becomes necessary or an owner decides that he or she wants to move on it, the capacity is there to move quickly. And you don't have to rip things out to put in infrastructure that could have been put in the first place.
I guess in that regard, I totally agree with you. And all of our new buildings, we have dual plumbing systems so that we are ready to use the reclaimed water. And we have the advantage that we have two treatment plants, sanitary and industrial. So we are building a pipeline to bring the treated wastewater to those buildings. But I agree with you 100%. And in our sustainability plan, we are even talking about desalination facilities so that we become totally independent in terms of water supply. But those are long-term goals.
One other thing to add, because airports are often at a distance from sewage treatment works, is there's a growing body of work of on-site wastewater treatment systems. There's some work at Stanford looking at that, which in our case for Palo Alto gives us at least the theoretical possibility of, instead of taking water down to the sewage treatment works, treating it and then pumping it back uphill to where it's being used, can we just treat it where it's being generated so the reclaimed water can be used right there, saving energy, piping infrastructure, and so forth. Still an emerging area, but a lot of promise there. And in fact, in San Francisco, the SFPUC building is a sterling example of on-site treatment in a 900-person office building in the middle of a big city. So lots of possibilities here.
Great, thank you. Do we have any other questions right now from the audience? Any follow-up questions? Any concerns about drought at your airports or projects you're working on? Hearing none, I know we're running a little bit out of time here. If I could just go down the line with the panelists and try and get everyone's final thoughts on your sustainability initiatives and innovative ways that you're moving forward with them.
just echoing what both Carly and Gil mentioned, asking questions and integrating sustainability into all aspects of your operations, not just, don't allow it to be siloed. There are a lot of resources and ideas among your staff that you don't want to miss those opportunities.
Sustainability is all about design. It's about designing the structures and the tools and the infrastructures and the processes that we want to meet the needs that we want. So you got to be really clear about what are we really here to do? What is it that we're trying to accomplish? Design always happens, within constraints. You never hear an engineer say, I don't want to take the tensile strength and materials into account when I build a bridge because it's going to hamper my creativity. Now you just deal with it because that's part of what you do as an engineer. Gravity is the law. Sustainability is going to move into that kind of dimension of just something that has to be taken into account in design. The good news is that when you do that, when you start looking at projects through a sustainability lens, you can see opportunity that you never saw before. The economics actually get better. The performance gets better. We've got years of thinking about environmental at the expense of economics. Not true.
I'll definitely echo that. I think something that I always want to make sure when we're educating new teams about sustainability is that it really is a balanced approach. So it's not just environmental sustainability. So I think that does often turn people off because they see it as that additive. So it's going to have a cost implication there. So really, actually, we spoke about the Envision rating system. We have a project we're going after the first level of award there. And they asked for my ideas, could we go to a higher level? And I said, I don't recommend it. You're just going to be paying for that and you're not going to be getting benefits. So that's kind of the lens I try to approach sustainability in. Is if you're getting the benefits and it makes sense, do it. But if it doesn't and you're just doing it for an award or for some sort of, specific benefit there that's kind of outweighing the others, it really is not sustainable.
I would just like to say that you don't have to be a hub airport to get involved in this whole issue of sustainability. There are lots of things that we at the GA reliever size airports can do. So I would say I would offer to have a conversation with everybody just to maybe expand a little bit on some of the things that we're doing. But you don't have to be a big airport to get involved. So leave it at that.
All right. Well, I guess we are over-challenging ourselves, but I'm sure that at the end we end up with doing what's feasible and not something that's beyond the realm of, rationale. But still, we set up big goals and then try to achieve as much of it as possible. And I encourage you to do that too.
Great. Thank you very much. With that, we will conclude this session, but I did want to thank each of my panelists for being here today and joining us for this. I also wanted to thank Vicki, the conference committee, the IT guys in the back who have done a great job here the past few days running this new technology. Again, I wanted to thank DUDEC, the session sponsor, and for our speakers, we have certificates for you. On behalf of the organization, we have decided to make donations to the Wounded Warrior Project, and we will present certificates to each of you for that. Thank you very much, and John Stout has a couple of housekeeping items to take care of.
Just a quick housekeeping item for this afternoon. The next session is at 1:30, but you can be back by 1:25. Gladys will be drawing names again for some really good prizes, and you must be present to win, so hope to see you just before the session at 1:25.
Thanks, everybody.